Welcome again, everyone, to the Self-Sufficient You podcast, where in this episode I talk with Darryl and Milena Weinberg of Niagara, Ontario, who have started School Pods Canada. It's not homeschooling, it's something totally different, and yet another alternative system rising up from the ashes for the people, by the people. Hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Let's go. Hi again, everyone. David LeBlanc here, host of Self-Sufficient You Community, and I'm really excited to have Darryl and Milena Weinberg, who are the founders of School Pods Canada. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Hello.
So, when I was growing up, I heard of homeschooling, and I had a general idea what that was. I never really knew anyone who did it. Thought maybe it was for those folks who maybe lived out in the country somewhere, didn't have access to I guess public education or whatever. So, over the past few years, very recently, I've really come to better understand homeschooling, but new to the concept of learning pods. So I'm excited to talk about that with you today, and your business, School Pods Canada, and how you got started and how it works. So let's just kick this off about why did you start School Pods Canada?
Well, as with a lot of these things, it was serendipity, really. We had a couple of friends over for coffee one day. And the husband was having a casual conversation with Milena and said, do you know anything about, what was it, learning pods or school pods?
Learning pods, yes.
Yeah. And Milena has been a professional educator for 20 years now, has taught in the public school system, and really focuses on keeping up to date with trends. And so she knew the origins of where these things came from. And once she explained it, our friend had a friend of his who lived in Montreal, who has been in the private school support business for like 25 years, where he supported private schools with various services. And he got on the phone with him and he says, we have got to get these school pods started. And by the way, we have our first teacher.
Yes.
And so we began to build upon, because this is during 2020. It was during the lockdowns, and when a lot of the madness was happening and parents didn't know from 1 minute to the next as to what was happening. School was on, school was off. What were they learning? And so we just decided that, we need to move forward with this. And as with many of these things, it's an opportunity from God to resolve a problem that we see.
Yes.
And so we worked with them for a little while. They ended up pulling out. And so we launched School Pods Canada back in 2021.
Yes. And
So Milena, you're a professional teacher by trade and probably passion. Darryl, what's your background?
I'm in full-time ministry, actually. I'm a congregational planter. We moved down to the Niagara area about 3 years ago with the intent of establishing a congregation. I have an online ministry that I've been doing for about the last 8-9 years now. And I'm a published author. I just published my first book last year as well. But I also have a background in HR recruiting and sales and marketing. So to come alongside of Milena and really start developing this business for me was a natural fit.
Yes. And for a lot of teachers, they have passion for teaching, but the business side of things, we need help. So that's why we kind of came together as a team, and we started off with our own pod, but then we felt that we need to help others because we saw a lot of pods getting started and falling apart. So we wanted to be that support and that glue that makes pods stick and stay together for a long time. I mean, for me, the idea of pods really started, I guess, when we started homeschooling. So I was a public school teacher for several years, and I wasn't happy in the system. We had our son, and I felt that to me it was important to stay home and raise our child. especially being instead of going to a school. And I saw that I just didn't feel that what I did really mattered, and there were a lot of politics, and I just didn't feel that I was living out my passion in the system. So we started homeschooling, and of course I started connecting with homeschool communities. We started homeschooling in Peterborough, we lived at the time, and there was some wonderful programs, and people wanted to get together and homeschool their children together. And so this other mom and I started a co-op where a few parents got together, and so we kind of divided up the duties, so prepare some kind of lessons for kids, and whatever our skills were, we kind of taught the children that type of skill. And it was wonderful, except we found out soon that a lot of parents didn't feel confident to teach a group of kids. Life kind of got in the way, and they said, oh, I wasn't able to prepare something. So this other mom and I, we kind of ended up taking most of the load for teaching that part of that co-op, and just to keep it going. And so at some point she and I said, well, why don't we just kind of put a program together and charge a little bit of money, and have parents drop off their kids, and so they can take care of their life, and so the kids could still get education, and we can benefit from, you know, our spending our time and resources teaching kids. So that's kind of when Pods started. But we never really thought of doing it as a business. We thought of just, you know, just doing it as a part of the homeschool community. But when COVID came around and everything got locked down, even homeschool groups stopped meeting. It actually affected the homeschool community very much as well. And so there were no longer all these programs available. And our son would tell you his hardest homeschool year was the year things closed up, and he wasn't able to do anything social. And that's when we realized, you know what, children are suffering, they're struggling being at home. They need to keep getting together. So after this friend of ours spoke to us, and we saw that a lot of parents were starting to have chatter on social media, we decided to launch Pods.
Okay, I'm hearing this term pods a lot. So what the heck is this pod? How does it work? Let's get into that.
Right. I just wanted to go over, because actually it's true, when people hear the word pods, there's so many different ideas, and they do come in different shapes and sizes. Mm-hmm. So specifically, we called our company School Pods because we are combining school, like private education, homeschooling, and into one thing. And so the children are taught by a teacher, and the parents could participate in any way they want, but the teacher sets the program with the parent input. And this way the parents can do like their business, whatever they need to do while the children are learning, and making sure that there's a full program for them. Learning pods are a little bit different than school pods. Learning pods could be something like the co-op that I described. So parents can get together and maybe teach the kids a skill, or maybe a specific subject, or one parent can take on a few kids, or something like that. So that's more parent initiated. There's no professional teacher necessarily involved in that. And so it's not a full program. So the parents still homeschool at home, and they just get together for specific learning.
So it's an organized homeschooling amongst parents, kind of coordinated, somewhat structured, but not fully, I guess, led by a professional kind of idea, right?
Yeah, the focus for those different model, like the learning pods, it could be a forest school, it could be different things, like it could be a social pod. The focus really isn't on the academics. And this is where we really came in, that we felt that what children were really lacking. I mean, there's been a very specific attack against the education system for a long time now to dumb down the kids, because a tyrannical government fears an independent thinking people more than anything else. Because when you have the ability to come to your own decisions, you're going to look at the media and you're going to say, that's not true. and then they have no power anymore. See, truth always wins out, and that's why there's all this suppression of truth. And so what we want to do with school pods is to equip children with the ability to think. Our intent isn't to tell people what they need to believe. What we want to do is we want to give them the tools that are necessary to come to their own conclusions.
And literacy is a key to that. I mean, during the slave times in the South, any literate slaves were a danger, to.
It was illegal to teach your slaves to read in the South.
And so it's almost like that's kind of happened in the school system now. So literacy is really like I've been following the statistics, they're revamping the programs, especially here in Ontario, because they're finding literacy is not up to par. Children are graduating from high school, barely knowing how to read forms to apply for jobs. And, so that's really disturbing. And so we wanted school pods to have high quality education where children exceed. And so that's why we wanted to hire a professional teacher to put this quality program together. And that's not to say that the parents at homeschool do not provide quality programs. I think some parents do a wonderful job. But we have found that also life is busy. So we're here to help those parents who are not able to dedicate that time.
So it was really, even though it started before a few years ago, I guess the real push was during the lockdowns, and where, like you said, parents, you had kids at home now, we had a lot of parents working from home, so they're juggling shifting duties, or if you're a single parent, trying to manage somehow between getting your work done and trying to teach your kids something, a fraction of the curriculum. And I think, I guess a lot of people realize that though that was very difficult, it probably opened some eyes that, this is actually a better mode than, the Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, going to an institution, whether it's us as adults going to the office or kids going to the school institution. So now you're at the point of, I guess it's being more formalized, and you're putting some organization around it. And what I really loved what you said is, unlike the traditional school system, is there's parent involvement. And I know and just by saying that, it sounds so basic, like why wouldn't there be? But, if we all think about those who have school-age children today, their involvement is almost not wanted. In fact, if you step up and make a suggestion or try to get involved, you're pushed away. So can you tell us a little bit more about what is the parent involvement, to what degree? And I guess it kind of falls into what kind of experience would a child expect to receive?
Well, the beautiful thing about the model that we've set up is that it's very systematic in how the foundation is laid, but each pod is customized at the same time to meet the needs of the children. So even when it comes to what curriculum we're going to be teaching, it really depends on what children are in the pod and what the parents want to see. So we have a fairly extensive questionnaire that we go through with the parents ahead of time. We want to know, do you have a preference for, is it Montessori, Waldorf, Charlotte Mason? Is it, classical? Is it, what kind? And most parents wouldn't have any idea of what those things are, but some do. But when you start digging into it, they also have a specific preference for, what the emphasis is going to be. So if we have more of a rural pod, let's say, then chances are that the parents are going to want to have more of an emphasis on things like farming, homesteading, and, getting back to the earth type thing. You might have a pod where you have a whole bunch of kids who are musically gifted, because that's kind of the community that all pulled together and said, we want a pod. So then we would work with the parents to try to incorporate musical teaching, or maybe we want a bilingual pod or a French immersion pod, or whatever the case may be. How the pod is founded is all the same. Everybody signs a contract with us. We have policies and procedures. We have rules that everybody has to agree
by. Yes. And we make sure that the parents of the pod meet ahead of time and they talk about what they want. Because in the past we have I have been hired by a pod where the parents kind of hired me and said, well, we've discussed it, go ahead and teach our kids. And I realized that there were some conversations that didn't happen ahead of time. So we promote that conversations happen ahead of time, so decisions are made. And then the contract is really what we as a group decided to do for the pod. And then everybody says we agree, and this is what we're going to commit to. Of course, we review our contract maybe halfway through the year and say, how did it go? Are we still pursuing this goal? Do we want to change our goals a little bit? So that's where we need the parents' input a lot. How is it going? Like, is this what you envision? Do we want to envision something different? And so we provide the structure how we can make that happen. Parents can be involved by even coming in, providing supervision during, sometimes having a second adult in the pod. You know, in the past, what we have done is the teacher would be with the kids for certain hours a day, and then the parents maybe want to spend 1 or 2 hours at the end of the school day. So until other parents are coming from work, you know, 1 or 2 parents could take turns doing childcare. Like, the parents could be involved in so many ways. They can teach a skill. They can come. Actually, this is what we've been discussing. We can probably have a take your parent to pod day and have the parent come and tell what they do. And if the kids are interested, it's really could be very enriching. The parents have to be involved.
Yeah, I mean, we're right now we're setting up a pod down in the Niagara region, and the father of the girl that are hosting it, he builds custom cars. So one of the things that we've discussed is maybe having within the pod the opportunity to maybe go in the shop one day or something like that, and he can start teaching. I mean, it's going to be younger kids, so there won't be a whole lot. But what happens if, you know, someone knows how to do woodworking? What happens if we have a carpenter involved?
So when we have several pods, that one parent could, and you know, we can bring the different kids to teach at different times, and the parents really love to see that community happening and contributing.
And that's really the essence of what we do. As a congregation planter, I don't just establish churches, I build communities. And we look at school pods as really an extension of that we're not just trying to build an education community. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build a community of like-minded parents who all want the best for their children and want to get involved. We really encourage the parents in the community patronizing each other's businesses, for instance.
Yes.
So if you've got
bartering a little bit,
bartering, whatever the case may be, because, you know, from a macro perspective, Dave, what we're looking at is that the government is turning more and more against us. And biblically, we know that's going to happen. So what we have to do is we have to foster these communities outside the system that are going to be able to support each other. And I know that's very much what you and your wife are doing, and that's very much close to your heart as well. Yeah. We just have a particular niche that we're servicing with that idea.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the concept of, you know, it takes a community, right? Takes a village to raise children, and people get involved, and it's such a refreshing, you know, just to hear what you're doing. I think why wouldn't any parent want that for their children? I think back to the you know, getting the parents involved who may have a specific skill. You know, the example of the mechanic. I mean, I think especially young kids, when they're exposed to so many different things, it just fuels their potential. When I think of public school, you know, you're taught the math and sciences and, you know, some of those things, but unless your parents expose you to different things, I feel like you're capped, like your potential is capped. So later in life, so I really love the idea of exposing, especially the younger kids, to a variety of different things, because that might spark them maybe as a teen to be a mechanic or be a woodworker or whatever it is. I just find that those kids are so impressionable, and exposing them to help them to find their talents later in life. You're planting that seed. And it's one of the things that we as parents, I don't think, do as well in this generation, because we're not as diverse, say, as our grandparents, who maybe worked on a farm and did a bunch of different things and had a lot of skills to transfer to kids. Today we're kind of, singular focused, a bit too much tech, and our kids are losing. We're missing a generation of kids that are capable of just being resourceful, working with their hands, or whatever the case may be.
Well, and we've even got this couple that bought some property up in the Kawartha regions, and they want to turn it into a camp. And so we're in discussions right now with trying to figure out how we can make that as like a destination with it for the pods, that maybe, they can have a camp up there for a week or something like that. And they can learn things like homesteading. They can learn things like, how to take care of the animals and things like that.
No, we do feel that obviously learning the languages and the maths and the sciences is important. Obviously, the children need to know how things work. But then take that into something practical and practice that instead of just being book knowledge, for sure. Some more hands-on learning.
Mm-hmm.
They're still getting the traditional core curriculum, say, of many provinces, but how many kids per pod, and what are the age groups that we're looking at?
We have between 5 and 10 children per pod, so we cap it at 10. And by having more in there, it has a couple of benefits. Number one, the social dynamic is different when you have more children, because there's more relationships, they can do more things together. And then also it helps spread the cost around to more, because the pod has to generate a certain amount of revenue, because one of our main priorities with this is to also provide a livable income for teachers. There's a lot of teachers, and they tend to get lost in the conversation for some reason, and this is because the government has been responsible for education for so long, that parents just automatically assume that teachers are somehow, they're going to photosynthesize or something like that, like they don't need to be paid because someone else always took care of that. And so what we want to do is we want to provide a decent wage so that we can hire quality teachers. So that's why we say that the pod needs to generate a certain amount of revenue regardless of how many kids. So the more kids in there, the cheaper it is for each parent. But then when it comes to the the curriculum, it really depends. So the children, we try to limit the age range to about 3 to 4 years. Anything beyond that, it becomes a little more difficult. But even within, like if you have a K to 2 spread, or if you have, let's say Milena just ran one from grade 4 to grade 8.
Yes.
So we had up to 5 years. That can be very challenging. And even if it's only 9, 10 kids. So this is where we come in, where Milena is the director of education. She comes alongside of the teachers and she mentors them, because she's done this for so long, that she can help give advice and techniques of how to teach math to 4 different years.
Yeah. And this is why I like to come along with the teacher, because I know it's a challenge, even somebody who comes from the public school system and then has a pod, you teach 1 to 2 grades maximum, split level, right? And that's the maximum. Then you see like 4 age groups. And even within one age, children are at different levels because of what's happened with education the last little while. So just being able to assess where the kids are at and just where to start from them and how to build them up rather than jump too far or hold them back too much. So I really I have regularly I talk to the teacher from each pod and make sure that they how things are going, make sure they have the resources they need and the techniques to deal with whatever comes up, because things come up.
Yeah. And so, our philosophy is that we don't try to cram the kids into a preset, level or whatever it is. We have to meet them where they're at. And our objective is to push them to be all that they can be. So if they're ahead, we want to continue to push them to be ahead. If they're behind, we want to fill in the gaps so that we can get them up to speed.
And they catch up pretty quick. A lot of kids who have come in with no confidence or whatever, when you work at their level, they have to gain that confidence first. You know, the thinking has to catch up with the fact that I can do this, right? And this is another thing we teach in the pods, is those life skills and thinking, the like growth mindset, not giving up when things get difficult, you know, problem solving, you know, just really explicitly teach those things, because without those skills, the academics are really not going to go anywhere.
Well, yeah, I mean, the academics are important, but I mean, it sounds to me, because of the way you operate and your philosophy, is you're supporting and developing, you know, the leaders of the future, right? Just as adults, because when you know, and I know my generation, probably our generation, I know for me that I didn't learn a lot of, I guess, life skills, or I guess coping skills is probably the best one, until they were in front of me, you know, in my 30s, 40s, and 50s. I was never taught problem solving in school. I was never taught how to calm myself down and maybe meditate if I was in a stressful situation. So, you know, I think most people as adults, we learn as we go, and probably fail miserably and suffer from it, which get manifested into health issues and mental health. So not only are you teaching the math and science and all that, but you're also, it sounds like you're really creating a space where you're developing real solid citizens in their community as children, and that just continues into their adult years. And you know, I think about the troubles that are before us today, but whenever there's troubles, it's also an opportunity for positivity. And while there's a lot of people like yourselves right now who are developing this alternative system in the education space, we need these kids who go through your system to be continuing, you know, 20 years from now when they're adults, and to keep this positivity going in the future in the right direction.
Well, and you know, someone who's been in pastoral ministry for a long time, my biggest challenge is dealing with people who've never learned how to control their emotions and think critically about things and introspectively. And so you got people who they were never given those skills and never encouraged to do so. And what ends up happening is you unleash chaos on society. The fact that very few people know how to properly resolve a conflict, for instance, is one of the biggest problems we're having. And so, and of course, you know, the powers that be are feeding into this. They're creating the division. They're creating the hate. They're creating the using wedge politics. I mean, Trudeau has been an absolute master at that, and that's because he's gotten training from, you know, the guys over there. So until we stand up and say, no, we're not going to take the bait anymore, that's not going to stop. But if we can start instilling that in the children at a young age, it becomes much easier as adults. Because I like you, there was a lot of life lessons that I didn't learn until my 20s, and man, they hurt a whole lot more when you get older. It's like falling down. When you're 3, falling down doesn't hurt so much. When you're 33, it's a different story.
Well, and many times when I you know, take the time in my pod to teach the kids this about conflict resolution, and the first step is calm down before you do anything. and you know, and sometimes the kids like, well, my mom or my dad or somebody I know, like an adult I know, doesn't do. I'm like, well, you know, adults are having to learn this too. So we're having to have this discussion. We as adults, we continue learning. And sometimes if we haven't learned it in the age that you guys are at, then we have to learn. Like, I have to explain to the kids why adults are the way they are.
Because often they're just kids in big bodies.
Yeah.
But I love how you're bringing everyone together, you know, the parents, the kids, the teacher, into these conversations, because it's just life, you know, and I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. And we all have something to learn, especially from the kids, because they just look at things differently than we do. And often, I'm sure you've experienced this, you've learned a ton from the kids that are under your care, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. We learn from them a lot. And, you know, I know I've had to apologize one day that I got upset about something. I said, oh, you know, I didn't calm down first, you know.
They gave you a time out.
Well, because once you teach them the principles, they'll remind you as well. And, and this is kind of the mutual accountability, and it's wonderful. And that's why we need everyone involved. And the other aspect we haven't mentioned is that we encourage the teacher and the parents to be in constant communication, because kids have been subjected to a lot in the last little while. And I read an article somewhere that both adults and children, are pretty much in a state of PTSD after what has been done to our society over the last few years. And so we need to all work together and really, so when a teacher talks to the parents, they can come together as a team to help the child to resolve issues that have come up, because things have come up, like they just have, and we just have to have open conversations about that, and then we, with the focus to resolve those things.
How do you deal, how does the pod deal with some of the current events that we see happening in our public school system regarding some issues? Maybe some of the push or policies on inclusivity and equity. How would, say, a pod address that could be different from, say, a traditional public education aspect?
Well, coming from a Judeo-Christian background, our job is not to enforce anything that we believe is the domain of the parents. So we believe sexuality and spirituality are the responsibility of the parents to teach their kids. You teach your children your values.
Yes.
That being said, we also don't allow anything to be taught that would violate what we consider to be biblical truth.
Well, and we, we've had this conversation because of course it comes up, especially I've taught older kids, grade 4 to 8. And I say to them, well, scientifically, there are two genders, just because of genetics. I've studied genetics and so forth. And now all the other genders that are being talked about, they're just choices that people have made, right? Like they're
constructs. They're not even real.
So we need to give people the right to make choices, but we don't have to do what the other people around us are doing. We have to decide what we believe. And then I encourage all the teachers to say, you know what, when it comes to stuff like that, you can explain what you believe, but then we encourage the children to go back to the parents and say, have those conversations at home. Because the whole idea of the pod is really to do learning together, and so not to shun those questions and issues that come up, but a teacher can quickly say, well, this is what the facts are, and even present different beliefs. But then you should really go home with your parents and discuss that. And then you can let us know what your family believes. And we respect our values, but we are really against pushing anything on anyone. And diversity is a good thing, as long as we give each other the right to believe different things.
It depends on how you define diversity. And what we know is that there's a bunch of trigger words that they use out there to say one thing, but it really means another.
They've been used out of context because, and this is what we talk with our generation, in school, we had gay, classmates and so forth, but it was just something that was there. It wasn't focused on, discussed profusely. You know what I mean? The whole point of children being in school is to learn, to be literate, and then the family values should be happening at home. That shouldn't be the focus of the education place.
We're at School Pods Canada, we're not interested in helping people choose their pronouns. We want to help children understand what a pronoun is
and how to use it grammatically properly, right? So
well, very well put. Yeah, that's quite, from, I guess, my opinion, that's quite different from what I see and hear in the current system, where there is it's almost as part of the curriculum, or it's part of policy, where they're getting into pushing it, I guess. They're initiated by the school board or the school system to have these conversations. And just so I fully understand what you're saying is, if these conversations come up, maybe from a student or a group of students, the teacher is allowed to share their opinion, but the message is go home and ask your parents, and and so it's based on the values of the parents at the end of the day, not based on the individual opinion or values of the teacher or of School Pods Canada.
Exactly. Again, the focus for us is academics. It's focus on teaching truth,
Life skills.
there's plenty for us to have to focus on, rather than all this nonsense, which is really causing great harm, and we need to get out of that.
Yeah.
And while we certainly applaud and support those who are fighting against the school boards and things like that, at the end of the day, I think our greatest solution is just to create an alternative system and to pull our children out.
Yeah.
Well, we're seeing
And
that in medicine with alternative medical clinics. We're seeing it with alternative financial.
Exactly.
We're seeing these citizen people-led initiatives, people valued things popping up because they just want something better, something different than the norm.
Well,
So
the current system is broken right across the board. And so at one time we had things good, but unfortunately on our watch, we let it go. And now we're going to have to fight to gain our freedoms back. See, once you let something go, it's much more difficult to get it back again. And this is not going to be an easy fight. And this is the thing about pods, is that we have a lot of parents who really like the idea of it, but there's a huge difference between interest and commitment. And the only way that these are going to work is that if people are truly committed, are going to roll up their sleeves. We just did an open house, for instance, here in Niagara a couple of days ago. And the parents, they were on it. The dad is, reconfiguring his whole garage in order to make it a classroom. He's wiring the whole thing for lighting. Mom was on social media, like constantly for a couple of weeks, just promoting, inviting people. We can't do all that ourselves. And so the only way this is going to work is when we have like-minded people come together and say, we will until.
Yeah, we provide the structure, but we need people to roll up their sleeves and do this with us.
So we can't have people come to us and say, well, I have an 8-year-old and I'd like a pod. I have a magic wand down there, but it doesn't work too well.
Yeah, no, the community, it's community can build it. There's no individual can do what we do, what you do, or any of the initiatives cannot be done by individuals. And we want to come back towards this community and away from, like, it's good to be an individual, but not individualistic to the point where you can't work with other people. You have to work with other people.
Yeah.
We've delegated as parents and citizens so many aspects of our lives to others. So that's a really good point. I think you just reinforced is if there's parents listening to this, watching this, and interested in the idea, it's more than the idea. You have to be committed to being a part of your children's education and the entire experience, and as part of a community. It's just not something you drop your child off at the morning and pick them up at night. They have to be committed to see it through and to be a constructive builder during the process.
Yeah, so we need parents to go find other like-minded parents, because we don't have the networks. I mean, if I've got interest, we had a lady contact us in Aurelia. So I'm not in Aurelia. I don't know anybody really, too many people in Aurelia. So we'll work with them. We'll provide support. We'll provide, posters and post on our website and things like that. But the reality is that the people have their own networks. And when they can start pulling together other people who they know to build these things, that's when we can come in and we can lay the foundation and provide structure for it.
Yeah, and make a lasting pod, because of the structure we provide. Yeah.
So where do you operate? Is it just in Ontario, or is it broader?
Currently, we are in Ontario, and but we've had interest from other provinces. That tends to get a little more tricky because different provinces have different rules. So we kind of have to be able to have someone on the ground to be able to help us out. And I know there are organizations, but our focus right now is to get Ontario established so that we can start spreading out. I've even got interest in the United States for this type of model. And I'll be heading down there for a conference actually next week, and I'll be talking a little bit about this as well. So Our vision is to have this international. I work with pastors in Africa. They want to see us bring this over there too.
Yeah,
So,
Africa needs pods too.
Yep,
But
exactly.
we do mostly work with Ontario because the homeschooling rules in Ontario are the most relaxed out of the entire Canada. Thankfully, all the provinces you can legally homeschool. So pods are possible in entire Canada and all the provinces. But the thing is, yes, the rules are different. So our pod structure is going to be a little bit different in different provinces, because what the province expects of homeschoolers in different provinces is different. Some provinces expect that a family would have a plan for the school year, and then they would have an evidence at the end of the school year. Well, a teacher can do that for the parents in those provinces. But we have to then now take our model and modify it for that province's rules, because we know education is provincially governed. So, but pods are possible everywhere in Canada for sure.
So for parents listening to this, let's just stick with Ontario for a second. At what point does my child need to pass the Ontario test, or meet the Ontario curriculum in order to get their Ontario certificate? And then my second question is, what's the acceptance of a child applying to post-secondary from your system?
Right. So first of all, the Ontario tests, they're not even mandatory, I believe, for kids in school. I mean, they're just informative tests. They're what it is it informs the government where to focus their funds for programming. It is not in any way benefiting the children, actually, the testing that is being done in Ontario. I know they do grade 3, grade 6, and grade 9. There's the Ontario testing.
Well, what about the certificate? My grade, I used to be grade 13. I guess it's grade 12. My high school diploma, how does that work?
So that's the other things. And we've had an information session with a bunch of homeschooling parents. Children in Ontario do not need a high school diploma to apply for universities. There are tests that they can write for, and so so homeschool children, when they apply to university, they go in the category of like international students, because the education in another country, like, we don't know what's the equivalent of it. So students will come in and write a test, and so their skills, and then will be assessed, and then they'll be recommended what courses they can take if there's some gaps. But we find a lot of parents who have homeschooled their children all the way up to the end of high school, their children place quite well in those tests, and they get accepted to colleges, universities without a problem.
Well, and that's even a question that we need to be asking is, do you want your children in post-secondary education?
Well,
because of what's going on this is where
indoctrination is happening there too.
Well, this is where things really started. And so, as to whether that's what we want to be part of. But even if you do, like, if obviously if you want to go into medicine, we encourage you to go to school.
Yes,
there are certain things that you still need training
regulated,
for. But homeschoolers tend to do much better right across the board than publicly educated children.
Well, and this is why we want, through school pods, to provide quality education, so that when children go to pursue something post-secondary, they will excel rather than struggle with testing and so forth. So there are no issues for homeschool children. So you will not get a secondary school diploma with us, but you will get really good education that will get you everywhere you want to go.
So how does it work if, I'm looking for my first job, I'm 18, 19, 20, and it says minimum is an Ontario secondary school, which is high school, a diploma.
Yeah.
Am I behind the 8 ball, or is that just, is there another way to succeed with that?
Well, because we homeschooling tends to be very community-based and hands-on learning, a lot of homeschoolers, actually, they already have volunteered at different places. So a lot of homeschool parents encourage their children to volunteer. So those homeschoolers get jobs at the places they go, because the people who they work for, volunteer for, see just how competent they are, and they get hired anyway.
Yeah,
So-
I haven't seen anybody asking for a high school diploma in a long time.
Well,
I mean,
I know the forms are just reflecting the system, but
Yeah.
there's just so many homeschool kids nowadays that there are a lot more workplaces that now have provision for that.
yeah, they want to know more about your experience.
Literacy. Can you make change at the cash register? Can you,
Yeah.
can you treat customers well?
You work well as
And
with the
if you're-
team. Yeah.
And if you're
Yeah.
going for an entry level job, then whether you have a high school or not, I don't think it really matters. They want to know how you're going to perform, and that's really what the system is now.
No, there's no disadvantage on for homeschool children whatsoever.
Nothing but advantages, because they're
Yeah.
more socialized. They're not in classrooms with 30, 35 kids. They're not being indoctrinated with all kinds of craziness. I mean,
The independent thinking
Yes.
innovators, and actually employers love that.
Mhm.
The good ones should, and they do. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the benefit of pods is that the children get the individual attention that they need in order to excel, because some children they need more one-on-one. And by having our pods with between 5 and 10 children, they're going to be able to get that. That's why we said that we're not going to push it beyond 10, because then it starts to rapidly decrease the
Yeah.
quality of time that they get.
Yeah.
I just know, just in listening to our conversation today, I continually am put back in time, sitting there in kindergarten, in grade 3 and grade 5, and thinking about my experience. And I just wish that I could have benefited from this when I was that age. And I think about those with school-age children. I'm sure many people listening be like, yeah, I would want this. I would need this for my kids. Just everything you're talking about. And I guess the last question, I'm sure that a question a lot of people have is just around the cost. And I know it depends on the number of families involved. And I love the idea of making sure that you're attracting, the best talent you can in terms of teachers and compensating accordingly. What roughly could a family who's considering putting, say, just one child, just for ease of math, into a pod?
It's a great question. And of course, this is a huge concern. There's a lot of people who are really fighting right now to get our tax dollars back from the government that we put toward education, so that if we can make that happen, that's going to change.
Yeah.
That's going to be a game changer.
So there are petitions going on right
Oh,
now,
yeah.
but in the meantime,
a parent is looking, and it works on a sliding scale. You're looking at somewhere between $700 and $1,200 a month, depending on the number of children in the pods, if it's a full-time pod. So if it's only 5 kids, you're looking at maybe $60 a day, and it goes down from there. A full-time pod with a capacity, you're looking at $35 a day for a customized education with a trained professional. I mean, that's less than babysitting costs. And the reason why we
Starbucks coffees, really.
Yeah,
well,
no kidding.
And that's the thing. So our pods, we give the option that they would run 3, 4, or 5 days a week. Excuse me. And so this also affects the, how much a parent would pay monthly, right? So because some parents prefer, okay, I would like my child to be with the teacher 3 or 4 days a week, and maybe 1 or 2 days a week I will work with them just to save on finances. So then the cost could go even below that 700. So the 700 is
full-time.
It's a full-time, full pod, and if it goes above 700 is because maybe there are fewer children in the pod. So the costs have to be shared amongst fewer kids, but that's where the parents can help out network. And so if you want to be paying the minimum amount, just help other families find out about this and join the pod. And so everybody benefits and doesn't have to pay an arm and a leg. But this is quite, reasonable, so it is less than a private school cost. and because we're saving from, not paying huge rent for buildings and so forth. That's why we encourage parents to host a pod, or the teacher. And one thing we do is, if a parent is to host the pod, one of their children does not pay tuition. So this way offsets their costs, so that they're, whatever expenses there are around hosting a pod.
Or if it's a church or office, we'll actually pay rent. So part of what we charge goes toward that. So, we try to keep the costs as low as possible. Everybody benefits. This has to be a win-win for everybody involved. And that was our starting point. If it doesn't benefit someone, then we can't provide it. We don't want that person involved if they're not somehow benefiting from what we're doing here, because community is based on everybody getting something out of it. Relationships are based on all parties getting a benefit out of it.
Yeah, that's part of the system we provide, to make sure that everybody obviously is compensated properly, and everybody has an incentive to participate. But it does take, obviously, it has to be payments have to be made, just because we're not funded by the government, and we don't want to be.
Yes.
That's one of those things. That's where our independence comes from, just being able to come together as a community to fund something quality.
Well, long term, we're looking at maybe setting up a foundation so we can do fundraising, provide bursaries or scholarships.
Yes.
So there's huge plans in place for where this is going to go, but the reality is that parents need to pull their children out of the school system now, because what they are experiencing is abuse. They are going to be permanently damaged by what they're doing. I mean, we have a group in Innisfil that there was an outright pornographic book that was read in, what was it, grade 1?
I think it was a video that was shown during an assembly, and the children, it was an elementary school, the children were traumatized, and the parents. So it's just, and you know what, not every school is like that. It depends on the principal, it depends on the teacher in the classroom. The issue is, though, that school boards do mandate that the teachers introduce these topics and talk to kids, and not necessarily age appropriate kind of talks and videos are being shown, and books. There are books in daycares that are available for gender questioning and stuff like that. Kids in daycares don't even speak sometimes. So it is not age appropriate. That's why we believe that we can provide more age appropriate and professional.
So we want to talk to as many parents who have these concerns about getting pods started in your area. You get 5 to 10 kids together, we find a location, we'll bring in the teacher, we're good to go. It's really that simple.
And all our teachers do have, obviously we check out their credentials, and police check with the vulnerable sector. We want to make sure that we hire the best candidate. Like, we want this to be quality. Like, I emphasize it enough. Quality is important to us.
And how long is a typical school year?
However long they want it to be.
See, that's another conversation the parents have with the teacher, and they say, when do we want to run from? When do we want to go till? When do we want to take our breaks? Now, we have recommendations of how many hours children should be together in order to go through kind of a full program that helps them go to the next level of learning.
Yeah.
Because education is like building blocks, So
standard is 5 hours a day, but we can go to September to June, like the normal school year, so that they can coordinate with the summer vacations and stuff like that. But if you want programs to run right through the summer or something like that, and everybody comes to an agreement on that, that's all on the table. We can incorporate that in.
Yeah, we parents tell the pod, this is when we want to take a vacation, and we negotiate our times of when to start. Now, we have been running a little bit more traditionally September to June, just because that's what people are used to. We go with, but as people break free from that will start changing.
Yeah. And then we can work on incorporating like alternative programs. Like Milena's going to be running a summer camp, for instance, in August. And there'll be different themes. So there will be things that we will be offering in addition to the traditional academic year.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I'm going to assume that what you've seen is a lot of people just don't understand what this is and how it could work. So they just bring their traditional approach to it, and they just assume it's a September to whatever June kind of thing. And so hopefully, this conversation today helps to maybe dispel some of the myths and put some concrete information in front of more families about what this is, the fantastic approach, just the values and the family commitment and participation to this, and the fact that they're going to design what's best for their kids and the other families involved. It's such a novel concept. And even in terms of the length and what's being taught, what's being emphasized. It's just, I mean, who wouldn't want that kind of experience for their kids? It's I just congratulate what you're doing. Darryl, you want to say something?
Yeah, Jesus said that if you harm one of these little children, it would be better if a millstone were hung around your neck and you were cast into the deepest part of the ocean.
Very serious, actually.
God takes the protection and raising of children very, very seriously. And what is being done to children is an absolute abomination. It is, words are hard to come by to describe what's going on. We need to do something about it. Milena and I have felt the calling to step up and provide what we can. And we just encourage people to listen. You don't have to be part of a pod. You can homeschool, you can do whatever it is, get the kids out of the system.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have kids in the system, if for someone who may be watching this, maybe they tell a friend, and who may have kids or whatever, and just the fact that we're talking about it today just is a little bit more of helping to spread the message around to others, and hopefully some people remove their kids from the system, others find you and give their children a magnificent experience today, and they end up being just wonderful citizens and leaders of the future.
And we need people to come alongside of us, and companies that want to support what we're doing. They may want to sponsor a pod, they may want to donate materials or equipment or technology or something like that.
Yeah.
We need community to come together to make this work, because we have a crisis on our hands and everybody's got to come together in order to resolve it.
So if families, companies, people looking to help out in any way, how can they find out more and get in touch with you?
Our website is schoolpodscanada.com, and the contact information is there. 905-581-9613 is our phone number. Reach out to us. We have a Facebook group, School Pods Canada, and tonight, actually, it's beginning tonight, but every Tuesday night we're going to be running a program called Smarten Up. And just addressing various aspects of education. We'll be running that on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel that we just created called Smarten Up as well.
Yeah, so we'll put a link on our website. Yeah. It's so new. We're just starting it this week. But yes, schoolpodscanada.com
is our website. That's the best way to get in touch with us. Call us, email us, smoke signals. We'll talk to you whatever way.
Homing pigeons, pink flamingos, all that.
There you go.
Well, thanks you both, not just for the conversation today, but more importantly for the really important work that you're doing. There's such a need for it. And I just know there's so many people who will be inspired and hopefully motivated from our conversation today to at least reflect on their current situation, whether they have kids or not, or whether they have loved ones who do, and to maybe take action, whether it's to tell others about this potential opportunity or the possibility, or to actually contact you and find out more and have their child or the children enrolled. It's one of those alternative systems that thankfully are being built around, and this one, much thanks and appreciation to you. So really appreciate our conversation today.
Well, thank you for having us, Dave. It's always a pleasure to be able to share what's been placed upon our heart, and I know it fits in with exactly what you're doing too, to bring alternatives to what clearly isn't working for anybody out there.
Yeah, so thank you so much for this opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
My pleasure. And hopefully we chat again soon and get an update on how it's going.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thanks.